Hello, everybody, and welcome to another interview with the artist. Here we are back again. We took a little break because of scheduling and other such things, but we're back, and I am joined today by an artist I am really, really excited to be talking to. Trovarion, how you doing, sir? Good to see you.
Hey, I'm doing fine. Hope you're doing fine too. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely, man. I've been looking forward to having you on, and it was a very random chance that we just started talking finally. And I said, let's get this done. So, for those of you who don't know, Trovarion is a very talented mini painter. We're going to look at some of his work today. You won a ton of awards. You have a channel on YouTube where you have lots of great tutorials. You have a Patreon that has even more and deeper tutorials. His work is absolutely stunning, and you would do well to learn from him if you're interested to do so. The links to his channel and his Patreon are down in the description. I would highly recommend you go check those out. So, I mean, bottom line, if you're not at minimum sub to his YouTube channel, you've made a bad decision in your life. So, like, let's just let that set right away. But so you've famously done a lot of different stuff. I mean, did I miss anything? Anything else you want to say about yourself as an artist, a content creator, anything like that?
Well, I guess it's just. I mean, I also do sculpting.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. It's a little bit complicated. It comes and goes in waves. Also, now it's a bit different because I don't have that much time in the day. I want to do everything, but I just don't have the time. So first of all, surely comes the Patreon, and then the YouTube, and then I can do sculpting. But I only sculpt for other people most of the time. And then comes my own range, and there's just too much to do, and too much I'm interested in.
Well, I get that. I mean, there's just yes, we could all do with more hours in the day. I've tried to eliminate as much sleep as possible. I found that's really helpful. If you just sleep less, don't have friends or a social life or do anything, you can build a lot of extra hours up.
Yeah, so the sleep. I mean, whenever I do the no sleeping thing, I just my productivity decreases massively. So if I get 7 hours per day, that's fine. If I go below that, then I lose more than what I gain from that.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It totally does. Yeah, I get it. I absolutely get it.
But I totally would like to have 48 hours in the day because, like I said, the sculpting also it's not that how to say. I mean, I do this full time and I kind of have to make a living, and it would be great if I could just sculpt and then sell like 150 copies of my next release. But the market is just so saturated, and yeah, it's just impossible to do. And yeah, but still, I'm glad I did the sculpting, where because I took like 5 years of no painting where I just sculpted, and that helped me so much with being able to do conversions and all that. So
sure,
I really like to be able to do all of it. So to be a more complete artist and to bring my visions onto what I want to paint more. So
well, and we're going to look later on at some stuff that you've sculpted for sure. And it's I mean, spoiler alert for the audience. They're really impressive. Like it shows that you put that amount of time into it. I'm envious and jealous on one hand, and on the other hand, glad that people like you are out there doing that kind of work, because I know it's not the kind of thing I will ever do. Like I tried my hand at it once. That is to say, like I took a nice long 2-day workshop on like learning to sculpt, and at the end of the 2 days, I went, nope, I hate everything about this. This isn't my thing. This is not for me. I'm going back to painting. I'm good. And it wasn't because I wasn't happy with what I produced. The process, I didn't expect to be. You're not going to do anything good the first time, of course.
Sure. Yeah.
It was just like the process wasn't as fulfilling to me. But hey, I'm glad you're out there because you make some great stuff. So we'll take a look.
Thank you. I mean, just one thing to add to that, it's to me, it's that much more appealing than painting because you're creating something from zero. And I've always had that desire to create something. And while miniature painting is nice, but you are a lot of the time just painting something that has been painted a lot of times. And
right.
So what are you doing to come up with something new and to stay relevant and so on? And yeah, with sculpting, that is a bit different. You can just do original stuff.
No, that's understandable. I mean, the reality is we're always working somewhat within the lines of another creator when we're miniature painting, right?
Yeah.
Like we're never starting with just the truly blank canvas of, like the our 2D artist forebears, where none of us are just Cezanne walking out to a field and setting up a blank canvas and just seeing what happens that day, right? Like that's not
Yeah.
the reality of the world we live in. So I get it, because when you start from the sculpt, you've just reset the canvas to 0. All right. Well, here's where I want to start. I think this is generally where I like to begin, and that is sort of, when did you start painting? How did you start painting? How did you get into this? Like, what was your journey to discover miniatures and miniature painting? And then, as well, when did you transition, if you did, like, if this was a point, from painting for some kind of hobby or a game or something into like painting for display, competition, that kind of stuff? If you're assuming you didn't just start there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's all a bit of a blur because it's been so long. The thing that I know as if it were yesterday was when I first saw. Well, I guess that's not true. I didn't first see it, but so miniatures as a whole were always there. I knew that they existed, but I wasn't interested at all for some reason.
Okay.
And then in 2000, maybe 2001, I was collecting some kind of CCG. I think it was Babylon 5. And I was buying packs in my local game store. And someone pulled out, I don't know if you know the Mage Knight stuff.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly. Someone was opening boosters and he was really lucky and he pulled like 2 rares that were cast in clear resin. I think it was like blue resin. Yeah, that was, and I was blown away by these things, and they were really looking great. And I wanted to get into that, so I just bought the boosters and played the game. But they were pre-painted, right? So they looked kind of crappy to me, and I was like, I think I can personalize these. So I would have an army that was dry brushed mostly, but I always took care to separate the lines and all of that. So I got into that really neat and clean painting right from the start. And then
now, who are you learning from at this point? So you see these figures, you start painting. This is just you just go off on your own. Yeah. Did you have a magazine? Because there's no YouTube 2001, right? This isn't
exactly. Yeah. No, I didn't know anything. The only thing that I was looking at was there was a site for Mage Knight repaints.
Okay.
I was looking at that site, but I thought, I don't mean to sound pretentious, but I always thought I could do better than that.
Sure.
And there was a few. Who was she? Is she an American paintress? I think she's involved with Crystal Brush. At least I saw her at the Jennifer Haley. Is that?
Yeah, Jen Haley. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's led up Crystal Brush for like the past X number of years. I don't remember, 4 years, 5 years, something like that.
So I saw a couple of her tutorials back then. I think. I hope I'm not saying anything wrong here, but she gave me a few ideas about painting. But apart from that, I just knew that I can, pull my brush over the edges, and then it will stay there. The paint would stay there, and it would look better than before.
Sure.
So, yeah. And then I got into and I played that game, and eventually I didn't like the community anymore because they were ripping everyone off here locally. They just kept the promos that were back in the days like $200 bucks. And they just kept the promos and sold them. And so I fell out with that community a bit. And I just still felt like painting. So I was going to that local game store and I was just picking up Warhammer. I think it was Tyranids back then.
Okay, gotcha.
And it got into more and more techniques. Tried to learn from everywhere. And I don't actually remember. It was probably just internet and Cool Mini or Not back then.
Sure, yeah.
And learning from others and soaking up everything I can. And just trying to get better at this layering stuff and glazing stuff. And then that was kind of the introduction to miniatures, and relatively early on, I wanted to push myself and increase the quality, so
Okay.
that I instantly went into just showcase painting, quote unquote showcase painting.
Sure.
I
Yeah, and
completely.
what's interesting there is so you didn't really have a lengthy period of time where you were just like painting for a game. Like, yeah, you started with gaming figures, but that was almost more just like a window in. You were always kind of painting for the love of the hobby, as it were, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
Okay. So then you're diving deeper in. So where's the first competition? Where do you make that decision? Like, okay, I'm doing this. Let's get into it.
Um, so there was in a neighboring city, I knew a guy that had a local game store, and they were holding a competition, and that was in 2004, I think.
All right.
Yeah, and I just entered that, and then he said, "Why don't you go to Golden Demon?" So I took the model that I painted for that competition and went to the German Games Day in 2005, and I think I had a second one painted, but that one didn't win anything. But that one took silver. I think it was silver in my first ever Golden Demon, and that was interesting, but it got to my head, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
And that should not happen too early in your painting career. I think everyone has been through that stage a bit, that has tried to win competitions, or that is a bit competitive with their painting. But I wasn't set up for a good way back then. My when you enter your first competition and you win something, then it's like, okay, what am I going to do for the next year, for the next competition?
Right.
I need to make gold next competition, or at least silver again. And yeah, I kind of wish I didn't win anything back then. Honestly, looking back at it, just have more time to ease into the whole scene and try to find yourself as an artist more, and not be under that kind of pressure early on.
Sure. Because
Yeah.
you immediately get that like that sophomore pressure, right? Of like, well, I won once. If I don't do it again, then it's a fluke or something like that. If you do, yeah, you get all these different thoughts. Like there's the initial feeling of like, oh, I really am as good as I thought I was. And then, but wait, am I really as good? And then you start going back and forth on yourself in your own head, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not good if you have a huge ego, because that can make you suffer a lot when you do this painting thing. And I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I went back to 2006. I'm trying to piece this all together, but I
Sure.
went for a couple of years. So I went to the Italian Golden Demon, and I also won there. And then I went again in 2006, and I won silver there. And then at least one more year. And then I had a year where I went, I think it was 2009, where I realized for the first time that I'm just doing this for the trophies. I'm not doing this for the fun of it anymore.
Sure.
2009, I might be off a year. It could have been,
Sure.
but something like that. There is a page like demonwinners.free.fr that has all the competitions ever made and all the winners and all of that. So if we were trying to piece it together, you can check out all the winners there, and it's an interesting site. But somewhere around there, I realized I'm not doing this for the fun anymore, and I completely quit painting. So
Wow.
2010, I also started working as a teacher, and I focused on that. And I don't think I painted for 3 years. I think it was 3 years. Yeah, I went back in the 2013 Golden Demons, and I tried to enter all categories, and I had 11 entries, and it was going from 0 to 200% again. But
Right.
it was
Sure.
fun. Yeah, it was fun. So I had zero pressure. I just wanted to enter 11 categories because I had stuff pile up that was 3 years old, and I just put in, I don't know, school holidays, right? Because I was teaching, and then there was this 2 months that I had free time during, I don't know, 40 degrees Celsius, and it was crazy, crazy hot, and I was sweating and all that, and I just pushed to finish 11 entries just for the fun of it. And that kind of ignited the spark again to get back into the miniature hobby, and to have fun with it. And I've been in a much better place ever since with miniatures.
And then I assume somewhere around there is as you came back to it more from the point of view of like, look, I'm not just going for, some kind of trophy. This isn't just competition. You're doing this partially for your own art, for fun, to explore, to do something you enjoy as a hobby, as a passion.
Yeah.
I assume somewhere around there is where you then discovered sculpting and wanted to get into that as well.
Yeah, it started a bit earlier. I think I did my first sculpt in 2007, but it was a bit like, when you're trying to customize your pieces, you
Sure.
are repositioning them, and then you are doing like just, you cut off a hand or an arm, sorry, and you reposition it, and then you reattach it, and that's it. And eventually you're thinking like, I could maybe do a complete hand or a complete arm. Why not do that instead? So I can, instead of going from this to this, I can do maybe something like that.
Right.
And that would fit and so I just gradually started reposing, re-sculpting Games Workshop or Infinity figures and so on. And then, eventually you're like, but if I can do a whole arm, why am I not doing a complete figure? And that started somewhere around 2007, 2008. And I was going slowly, but it just ramped up. And then in 2013, I was starting to do full sculpts. I think
Gotcha.
what's his name? Romain van den Bogart, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. He did a workshop back then, and I was going there, and then I just completely dropped everything else, dropped painting again for a couple of years. And I just sculpted for, what did I say initially? I think I sculpted for 3 years.
Okay.
And, yeah, in 2016, I lost my teaching job, and then I went back to painting like really intensely, which coincided, is that a word, with me starting streaming and doing all the online content creation and all that.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are. And you've been doing full-time painting ever since, right?
I would say it's more like full-time content creation.
Sure.
Honestly, because you spend so much time editing. And I've never done, or I have accepted one painting commission in the last 15 years. So it's not really the painting that I guess, but it's not how I look at it. I earn my money by teaching people and by creating content.
Right.
In the miniature sphere.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting sort of divergence across this community of like how, if you want to get by as an artist in this world, right, within our community, within the miniature painting world, which isn't the biggest world, right? Like, let's be honest, we don't have the biggest audience, right? There's a lot of interesting mixes that I talk to of people who have different sort of things, like they take some commissions, or they do this, or they have, a Patreon or this, and they stream here, or they don't do this, they do this. Because again, there, like you said, there's only so many hours in the day, right? And so ultimately you've got to decide what's going to both provide you a return that allows you to actually, live, but also like what's going to, what treadmill can you get on that you're going to enjoy? Because any of these things are going to require a lot of your time. Like you mentioned, like the editing, like that's just a constant grind, right? Because there's always the hunger for new content, for new video. It's just going to always be a loop. So like whatever you're picking, you better be ready to do it a lot and repeatedly and over and over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not complaining because I really, the editing part is fun too, right? It's just, especially for YouTube, like trying to be a little bit funny and doing some interesting edits and all of that. It's fun, but it just it becomes the majority of what you do. So if I spent all the time painting that I spent editing, I would crank out probably 2 miniatures per week. But in the standard that I want them to be, right? So not
yeah.
Dry brushing on them.
Sure. Yeah. Not just a speed painted miniature. Yes, I'm sure, which is something I do want to talk to you about. So I thought it's a very good segue. So, one of your series that I think has become very popular, right, is your Heavier Than Metal. Let's try that again. Heavier Than Metal. There we go. Series on YouTube, right, wherein you sort of have a certain amount of time. You set yourself 20 hours. And you say, I'm going to paint this thing. Could be, Imperial or Imperial Fist. Could be a this. Could be a that. Whatever. Sometimes it's Space Marines. Sometimes it's other things. And
most of the time it's Space Marines. It just happened.
Sure. I mean, as you were saying in like one of your recent streams, where it's like, look, we're doing this because you wanted it. Like you're the ones who voted on Patreon. That's why I'm doing another Space Marine variant.
Yeah. Where is it? I don't have it here. Yeah, that was the Custodes.
Yeah, the Custodes. Yeah, the like solar whatever. Yeah.
Because I said, okay, you voted for Custodes, but I'm going to do this my way. So I said I'm not going to crank out a full Custodes in non-metallic metal. Gold. So I went for a white variation of armor, and then I'm going to do a lot of the details in gold, so both parties can be happy.
There you go. No, absolutely. Why not? So what's interesting about that series is, one, I love the concept, and I saw that you I just watched your most recent video, which is painting a face in 20 minutes. I would highly recommend people to go check that out. That's really good too. And so you work a lot with time limits, and yet you also, I know, have a standard you hold yourself to of you're not one who I've ever seen really do much in the way of speed painting. Like you have a sort of standard of quality you like your miniatures to be at. So what makes you drive at both of those things? Like to both set a time limit for yourself and push yourself to that high quality? Because it feels like those can be, obviously bumping up against each other to some degree, right?
Yeah, good question. So after I'm done filming a miniature for Heavier Than Metal, I have 20 hours of footage, basically. So the video that is coming out of it on YouTube is, I want to keep them at 40 minutes or below, because let's face it, that's already, average view time on YouTube is 5 minutes.
Right.
But it's going to take as long as I feel like I am teaching people something. That kind of has to be in the video. So if it's just, watch me paint something for 40 minutes, that's not really what I want to do. Because I still want to be teaching people. That's what I do.
Right.
But I take the rest of the footage and I just create like maybe 4 Patreon videos out of it, where I can go really in depth. So to me, that is a way to both do YouTube and to do Patreon. And 20 hours, because I have a lot of painting time under my belt, and you just speed up things. You just know how to do certain things to make them faster and still look good, right? So 20 hours for me is actually, it's not a painting competition miniature, but it is a standard that I'm really happy with. So to me, these 20 hours are exactly the sweet spot for being able to produce content on both my platforms, how I make my living, and still be happy with what comes out of it. So that's probably, yeah. I forgot your initial question, but I think that
you got around to answering it. No, you were good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that balance, right? And it was interesting to me because I found it to be like watching through both like your streams where sometimes I've went back, I watch some of them and you're working on things that'll end up in those videos, or reverse going and like watching the video and then going back and finding the associated streams, right, where you're kind of working on them. It's just I find your process very interesting. Like as a painter, watching you work, the thing that I find sort of fascinating, certainly in contrast to myself, is you're such a very controlled sort of painter. And like, yes, you often will find your way through colors. Like I'll watch you say, well, we'll try some of this. We'll add in a little bit of this, this ice yellow or something like this, like trying to find the exact color and tone you want. But you're a very precise sort of painter in the way that you move over the miniature and control your brush and in a way that I think I oftentimes I don't find myself working that way. Like I often just will like work quick and dirty and sketchy and just over and over and over again until eventually I get to something I like. And then I start to just slowly refine. Whereas you seem to have a much more like direct path you're driving down that I'm fascinated by, because I don't know how much of it is you have a clear vision at the start that's in your head that you're making real, and how much are you finding as you're painting.
So that's interesting that you have that impression, because I feel like I have nothing planned at the beginning. Okay, what are we going to do? Maybe these colors fit the miniature. So what color fits to that color? Let's put that on the palette too. And then I have like 15 paints on the palette, and then I don't use like 5 of them.
Right.
So, but it's good that I'm making that impression to outside people, because that gives the impression of a bit of professionalism.
Absolutely, yeah, very professional. Yes.
Yeah, but I typically go. I mean, like I said, you just so brush control. I feel like is the way. If you don't use airbrush, if you are just painting with a brush, you need to learn brush control and how the pigment behaves when you pull the pigments or push the pigments and all of that.
Sure.
I guess that is what gives the whole, or what makes it appear really controlled. But that's just experience, and the rest is just let's slap this color here, and I need a bit of warm color, so let's use some ice yellow, and so it's a combination of, I guess, control technique that has been refined through years, or by now even decades.
Oh, sure.
And the general approach is going a bit faster wherever I can, but I will take my time when I feel like it's needed. So it's back and forth, and it's very chaotic in my mind, but I'm happy it appears different to the outside.
Well, I know, and I think it's interesting because it certainly, like, and I don't even mean necessarily your brush control, right? Because you're right. There's a certain number of hours painting. Everyone has a certain level of you get to a point where you have a certain level of brush control. What I mean more is like when I watch you control your colors, you often will step through like very, very slow gradients, right? Like you'll take your time and really hone in on the exact tone you want, right? Where it seems to, like, again, as an outsider, like you were driving at something. Now, I understand what you're saying is probably like, well, you're really just, let's lighten that up just a little. Okay, do I like it yet? Lighten it up a little more. Do I like it yet? And so on and so forth. But yeah, the feeling that you get as an outsider is like, oh, look at how carefully he's building these layers into this like exact control of the volume he wants. So yeah, very professional. You're definitely succeeding there.
Thank you.
All right.
But yeah, it's yeah. So a lot of people when they're painting, they have certain fears. And I always try to make them lose this fear. So It's okay because sometimes, as you said, I will just gradually try to build up a layer, and then I'm like, I really don't like the shade this took, or I want this warmer, so I'll take a color and I'll just glaze over it, and then the whole thing is gone. But that's fine, right? Because, well, it's not gone, it's just looking different.
Right.
So you can fix a lot of things on the palette, or sorry, on the miniature, with colors, and it's not all of a sudden crap because you had this great gradient and now the gradient is not so great, right? It's the results don't have to be perfect. You just have to have results, and then you can say, okay, I would like to improve on this in the next miniature, and so on. So that's how I treat it, right? I can always paint over it.
Right.
I don't know if that.
It totally makes sense. It's something that I try to impress upon people all the time, because you're right. It's so strange to me. This is a hobby, I think, where a lot of the hobbyists and artists and whatever you classify yourself as who are doing it seem to be driven a lot by fear. Like, I don't do this freehand. I don't do this glaze. I don't do this. Insert whatever you're not doing here. 100 things, right? People say they don't do it because they're afraid they would ruin it. And it's just that phrase, it seems so empty to me. I don't understand what you're talking about. It's paint, right? Like, you're not doing anything permanent in any way, shape, or form, right? Like, if you were sculpting marble and you say, well, you don't want to chip away this piece, because once it's chipped away, that's it. That piece is gone, right? You can't put the marble back on. I'd be like, okay, I can see why you'd want to be a little more careful. But I mean, even then you could just get a new piece of marble. But here it's just not even that. Like, you could lay down more paint, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would be lying if I said I don't understand it. When I was beginning, to get better and try to get better, I perfectly well understood what it means to have to be driven by fear or to avoid things because of fear. But I just tried to push that down and not have the fear guide me, but just be more, open and free, and just do whatever I want to do. And if it doesn't work, then, well, tough luck. I just wasted, quote unquote, 3 hours because the result isn't there, but I still had fun and I learned something. So
yeah. How much do you still experiment right now, being how long you've painted? And, obviously at this point, things like techniques and various, sort of the ways you're going about all the basics and the fundamentals, as it were, are well within your toolbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how much do you find yourself experimenting on, on any pieces you're working on? Do you still find yourself experimenting a lot? Or how much do you find yourself like, okay, I know I'm in tried and true territory here?
I mean, I try to do something new with every miniature, something that I haven't done before, whether it's a color that I have not used before, or a color combination, or just paint some model where I never have painted as a similar model before. So I try to do something new with every miniature that I do. And a lot of the time, it's just, like I said, I just put down colors and that I feel like fit the model, and then I just mix them in a crazy way and just slap them on it. So it's to me, it feels like every miniature I do is something that I haven't done before, which is probably not true, because there's certain things that I do, for example, steel non-metallic, I kind of do that in the same way, just because I know how to get to a certain result that will look good on this miniature. But there will always be one aspect that I try to do.
Are there things you use? So you mentioned following a process for steel. Yeah. And this is a really interesting thing to me. Like, I'm so glad you brought this kind of thing up. Okay. Because I'm always fascinated by what other miniature painters have as like go-tos, as opposed to things that they kind of just go, like off into, let's try this set of colors or whatever. So an example for me, I'll just share my own thing. I don't think I've ever used the same, outside of like painting an army where you want to be
sure
similar. I don't think I've ever used the same flesh recipe twice. in any way. I love, because I find flesh such a fascinating thing to explore, right? So I'll just grab any weird mix of sort of things that I think would make an interesting flesh tone, right? Even for, of course, you can just always go from, red, yellow, and blue and white down to that, up to just picking different flesh tones, different lines. And I always try to do something different every time. So are there things like that where you always find yourself trying a weird different combination versus things that you mentioned steel, non-metallic metal. You tend to have sort of a set of colors or a technique that you like pursuing. Are there things that you always find yourself trying something different on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have any example coming to mind, but the thing you've mentioned about faces, just because I just uploaded that video where I just speed paint, it made me think about what colors I typically use and what colors I used here. And I think faces are a good example because you can get away with so many different combinations. And I think the face is something that I vary a lot too. For example, if it's a colder model, then obviously you don't want to use too much red in there for the cheeks. However, you kind of have to have the red in there because it makes sense. So you have to think about, do you want to go by the theory, or do you want to be more artistic about it? So I think I vary face colors a lot. That is true. I also feel like non-metallic gold is something that where I haven't really, no, that's not true. I was going to say where I haven't really found the recipe that I always want to do, but I feel like it gets boring. There's so much to explore in non-metallic gold.
Right.
You can do cool gold, warm gold, yeah. Very contrasting gold, not a lot of contrast as compared to maybe steel. So pure steel, I always kind of do the same way, and gold, I really mix up a lot of the colors and temperatures and all that.
Well, it's fascinating. I love non-metallic gold for a lot of the same reasons, because you can almost pollute it with sort of any of a wide range of colors, and it'll still read as gold. Yeah. Right, between what you're showing as sort of the highlight of the ambient sort of diffuse lighting situation, the direct light of reflections, slash sort of your secondary reflections or shadow colors. You can just play through this massive spectrum, and yet when you're done, assuming sort of everything's been placed kind of correctly, frankly, it'll still read as gold.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's yeah, I agree. It's a fascinating thing to experiment with. It's one of the reasons that I don't know, how often do you get asked for paint recipes, like when you're working?
Yeah, a lot.
And how much value do you think giving people the list of paints that you used is actually giving them?
Oh, it has zero value.
I agree, but yes, there we are.
I mean, I get where people are coming from when they want it. It's sort of a teacher-student thing, right? Because you know that it's not going to be what they want, but they think they want it. Yeah, if that makes sense. So it
makes complete sense, yeah.
To paint like you painted this. But the problem is, I mean, sure, I can give you all the colors that I used, but the problem is I did not mix them. Okay, I'm taking this base color and I'm mixing in 2 drops of this color, so it's now a 50-50 mix. And then I'm using this 50-50 mix and I'm using another color, so it's now a 40-20 mix. So it's not precisely like that. And I don't think anyone in a showcase painting path is painting like that. That just doesn't work. And also, simply by the way of mixing and also how you apply the colors to the miniature is going to make so much difference. So the actual brush control technique is going to completely alter your experience with the same colors I have been using. But I totally understand where people are coming from. And the problem is that it's not just what colors did I use, but how did I apply them, and so on. So that's why I think recipes, unfortunately, are kind of useless. But that's also why I try to. That's why I still give the paints. But in my PDFs, for example, I always explain what I did and what was my reasoning behind using that color instead of another color, or how I mixed them, and did I use stippling? Because I mean, the color is going to look completely different if you stipple it on,
Right.
or if you try to blend it together. The way colors mix, two colors seldom mix the same way as if you were just stippling on one color over the other. It's just going to be so much different.
Well,
and
that's not even counting like how you set the volumes in the particular color transition, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if we both are painting a Space Marine leg, you will probably put the highlights slightly different, and then you have your shadows different too. And if it's just off by a bit, then the impression can be really different. So I always tell people to sure, follow recipe. It's not wrong to follow recipes, because I mean, it's like cooking, right? You are going to learn cooking by following a recipe, but eventually you always, and by chance or just because it's in your nature to do something different, you're going to alter that recipe, and it's going to be fine too. It's not going to taste 100% like what the other person you learned from produced, but you are still going to create something interesting and something new and something that is your own. So I kind of see it like that. Recipes are okay, but they're overrated.
Yeah, they're not the end. They're just a component of the larger journey. Yeah, absolutely. Like, you could give, a great chef 3 or 4 different ingredients. I mean, this is what, like, isn't this, I've never really watched a show, but isn't this what Top Chef is entirely based on, right? Like, they give a bunch of potentially good chefs the same 3 or 4 ingredients or something, and then say, like, go, and you end up getting wildly different dishes and takes and taste profiles and stuff out of those same ingredients. I don't watch the show, but it seems like that would be possible.
I don't know the show. It's probably an American thing.
It's isn't that Gordon Ramsay? He's British, right? So
is he? I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know.
Same thing for me. It's probably like asking me about a Swedish show, right? Or asking you about Canadian show, maybe. I don't know how that is.
I do watch a lot of Canadian television.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that was a bad example.
No, that's okay. We're not that far away. It comes down pretty easily across the border. It's porous for the Canadian television. It sneaks in. All right. So let's this is good. I want to transition over to look at some of your work here. So let me go ahead and bring this up, and we're going to look through some of your pieces, because I really am excited to share these with everybody. And I'm not sure that everybody will be innately familiar with all of them, especially if they came to your work, through maybe something like your Heavier Than Metal, and they think you only paint Space Marines, which is not true at all. Not even close. By the way, I love that you used a Space Marine leg as an example, because I'm pretty sure that if I were to do like a statistical regression on miniature painting photos shared on like Facebook or whatever, Space Marine legs would have an outsized percentage. It seems to be the first thing everybody shares, like number one thing everybody paints and shares, the leg. I don't know why that is. It's always the leg.
That's interesting. Yeah, but that could be true. Yeah, I
think it has that like cylinder volume, right? It's got these really interesting, it's sort of a cylinder shape, and the interesting volumes, the knee pad above it, like it just tends to look good, right? I think most people know how to work with it, and so it's like they do that leg and then out there. Anyway, all right, let's take a look here. Okay. Locked on me, share up. Here we go. So we'll start off with a bust. I think I pulled down 2 different examples of this one. So you want to take us through this guy?
Yeah, I guess just one thing to add here. What you said about people not knowing me, I guess that's probably my own fault, because I'm in this community, or however you would call it, since almost 20 years. So almost as long as all the super known. I mean, everyone knows Ben Comets, and we kind of started at the same time. But I just removed myself from it a lot by eventually stopping to post that cool mini or not, and not really being outgoing, and because eventually I was fed up with competing and all that, so I just retracted and I just had fun painting my own stuff. And
Right.
so I kind of regret that, not being super active in the communities and only just coming back because it has made everything so hard. But yeah, I mean, that's totally understandable that nowadays there's so many people that are doing it that not everyone can know everyone. But
Well,
yeah.
I think it's also a reality that I mean, look, full credit where credit's due. Those videos where you are, especially like a lot of the different Space Marine ones, it's a very popular thing, right? A lot of people play Space Marines. You're painting them exceptionally well, and like those videos are very, very popular. So it just might be, the fluke of that's how they came to know you, right? And sometimes first impressions are just that's how the sort of anchoring image we frame of people in our mind, right?
Yeah, I guess like Henry Cavill being Superman.
Right, exactly.
He's the Witcher now, so.
He'll always be the guy who was in Mission Impossible to me, right?
Oh,
That's
yeah,
what he was in.
the reloading fists.
You couldn't see me. I'm not on camera right now, but as I said, Henry Cavill, I literally did that reload his arms thing that he does in the movie. That's very funny. Anyways, I'm sorry. Let's get back to your piece here.
Okay. Yes. So this is something that. So my first miniature bust was a robot. I called it Broken. So I think a lot of people know that one. Whether or not they attribute it to me or not, it has been around on the internet quite a bit. And out of that single robot, I had the idea to create a universe where robots kind of went rogue and created their own state, and now they're being hunted by the states, or something like that. Just a dystopian universe where robots are trying to get their own rights and all of that. And I started this one by thinking about I want to sculpt a robot that has a turban on, because the way I see it, they have and the Broken paint shop has it, the symbols of their creators or the companies that created them on their forehead, quote unquote forehead. So this guy is covering up that symbol because it's a symbol of oppression, and he's covering it up with a turban. And that's the reasoning behind a robot wearing a turban. But he also has some gear that he scavenged somewhere. That jacket. I don't know how you would call it. It's a military.
Yeah, like his flak jacket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he scavenged that, and they are, trying to be independent from humans, but still kind of feeling that humans are something to strive for because they are thinking on their own, they are free, they're independent, and so they kind of want to become like humans. So it's a bit of a dilemma here. So they are trying to get independent from humans, but they're still dressing like humans and they're using their stuff. And that was the idea behind this bust.
So when you're sitting down, and this is sort of a really fascinating thing to me, is yet another element that I always find interesting to explore into. You really constructed like a whole world around this guy that you're communicating through a very small space, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, in the end, the bust is one of the more, you don't have a lot of surface area there. This isn't a diorama, right? Where you have all this room or something. Yeah. So, how much are you driven by like a narrative that's in your mind, either through your sculpting or through your painting? I've got to imagine that, especially for your sculpting, it's absolutely essential for you to have these kind of elements in your head that drive the individual decisions you're making throughout the process.
Yeah, so far, I always have something in mind. I mean, sure, I could sculpt another orc and it would be an orc and people would like it, I guess, because people like orcs, such as they do like naked barbarians. But like I said, I always wanted to create something original, and whether it was through drawing in school or through writing, for a period of time, it was just writing short stories. And I also wrote background for this range, and there is a couple of factions. So there's 2 human factions. One of them using clones, the other one outlawed clones, and they clash over that. And then there's some kind of secret alien race, just all of that outlined in a few pages. And it kind of helps me to keep the so right now there's just a human and there's 2 robots, 2 clone soldiers, and a human that I have not really finished. They are sitting in my cabinet because I don't have time to finish them. But they are, so those factions are fleshed out, and to me it helps having that flesh or that background story to stay consistent with the details. So all of them would probably be using the same technology, more or less, but they are different, right? So these are robots, and the others are clone soldiers, and the other ones are just normal humans. So it ties everything together, and that's what I want with this range. For single pieces, it is also I also try to come up with a narrative. So if you browse through my putty and paint gallery,
we got another one of them here, and I really like this back shot because it's so interesting with what's going on back here. I definitely wanted to share this one.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of comes back to he's just scavenging and he's grabbing everything he can, and then he's using these trinkets, like the I love New York sticker, which in this world New York probably doesn't exist anymore. But so he's trying to express individuality, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little touches here, both in the sculpting and the painting, that I really like. Obviously, yes, the backpack is so fun compared to like him and the rest of the model, and like it gives the scavenged feeling, right?
True.
Because this feels like what you would see, an elementary school kid wearing to go to like, grade 3 or something, right? It even feels kind of small on him, right? As though it is a younger child's backpack.
Exactly.
And just the little touches like the feathers, as you mentioned, the sticker, but there's a lot of little things that you then brought in through the painting as well. Like there's like the coloration of him is very warm when you look at how you used sort of your warm yellow highlights here in across this. You get this like almost desert-ish impression, which I think aligns with just sort of our preconceived notions about who would be wearing a turban, right? Although it's for different reasons. But then also how you've carried it through to like just the sort of minor kind of weathering bits and stuff like this. Like he's not in perfect shape, right? It's clear that he's upkept. He's functional. He's not some barely like janky piece of robot that's falling apart. But he clearly lives a life where he's not in some Star Trek pristine robot form, right? There's little cuts and nicks and things like that.
Yep, exactly.
So a lot of little elements you brought into this I really like, both through the sculpting and the painting to shape to that story. It really comes through.
Thank you. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I imagine them having set up camp in some kind of desert, because I imagine most of the future world to be barren and desert. So that's a good interpretation of the warm highlights and that being in the desert. So good observation there.
It's awesome.
To bring it back, every single piece that I do has an abstract of text where there's a bit of a backstory. So with that orc guy that has a bird sitting on his shoulder, I wrote a bit of a small paragraph where he just is about to hit someone on the nose, and then the bird lands on him and he's looking at him, and then he's like, okay, fine, I won't do it. So just to give a bit, I feel like, to me, sculpting is a lot of storytelling, and I try to emphasize on that by adding those little details.
That's awesome. I love that idea. I absolutely love that idea of like having a sort of small story paragraph, even if it's not directly seen, the fact that it's there, it's a sort of guiding principles for the miniature. That's
Mm-hmm.
a really good idea. Yeah, you should honestly, it's just total aside. I don't know if you've ever done it or if I just missed it. That would be a great thing to put out a little video on to just like share that that's a thing. I think that'd be a great inspirational thing for people. It's a good idea.
Yeah, I have something like that on Patreon. I should maybe do a public video. But I feel like, so one thing that is a bit, I don't want to be that guy that uploads a video and gets under 1,000 views or just over 1,000 views.
Sure.
I feel like not a lot of people would value that. You know, a lot more people value how to edge highlight the Space Marine. If that makes sense.
Sure. I'd say look at it like bonus content, you know? Like, yes,
I get
you're
it.
always going to have your home runs, but sometimes just sometimes a good, you know, get on base single is still solid, especially because to me, the way I look at it is just like you might really, that's just sort of very meaningful to a lot of people who that might inspire to create something really cool. So I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, no, I get it. Just time restraints and stuff.
Of course. We just spent all the time talking about how not enough hours in the day, and here I am throwing like, hey, do more stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so my whole Discord, because everyone that joins my Patreon also can hop on the Discord server, and it's a really fun community because I happen to have found all the trolls in the miniature painting community, and they are all in there, and everyone's like, when I post a new video, everyone's telling me, "Oh, you should have done this and that for that video." Oh, and someone else is saying something different, and you know, and I'm like, "Okay, guys, thanks for the input." No, but I really love my Discord community. Super supportive people.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a look here. So this is another great one. You want to walk, and this is I didn't separate them between work in progress and finished.
Yeah,
like is the way I organized them. But I will frame by, obviously anybody looking at it would know, but this is a current work in progress. We mentioned some skin tones earlier, and this one blew me away on skin tones. Like this is just fantastic skin tone work.
Yeah, that was born out of the desire to really, because I was doing all these quicker paint jobs. I said, okay, I'm going to pick a bust that I'm going to turn into a competition piece. You know, just when you are going to a competition that has an open judging system, you can enter a display. So I thought I want to build a display for competitions that I might be going to. That are not just Games Workshop, obviously. And to really push myself and see how crisp and clean, but still lively, I can go with skin tones, and that was the result of it. And yeah, I'm really fond of that miniature because it came out crisp and clear, and I did use a lot of stippling, which if you zoom in, you might be able to see it. But if you look at it this way, it's still down on the abs, maybe that little highlight just below the goggles. Exactly. That was just trying to use techniques that are maybe lesser known, or just pushing myself to a display level standard where I give 100% or 110%.
Yeah, it's great. Like I love I think what I really like about this one is, and this is even, you know, without seeing where the rest of the colors are going. First of all, you're playing with an aesthetic that I'm a big fan of, right? In that you're playing in this sort of cyberpunkish, synthwave-ish aesthetic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But again, like the interplay here between the very warm yellow light and then the very soft shadows that you've got, and the use of the pinks and the reds and the slight purple tones, I think actually works well with like just the background you kind of have set here behind it. But it also just sets a very particular environment, like a time of day. Everything about it just reads, and it has a really nice like satin-ish feel to it, like skin. Like you captured the sheen of skin really well here. So I think it translates fantastically.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people I mean, obviously, it doesn't mean a lot of. It doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people in their painting because they don't have to do it. But skin is super reflective. If you just put, I don't know, some yellow next to your fist, you will see that it gets reflected. And I kind of try to capture that too.
Yeah, this is awesome. I can't wait to see this one move along.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So here we have a very famous Marine. Speaking of Marines, so there's obviously a couple different videos and Patreon videos around this one, but you want to walk us through this guy?
Yeah, so that originated out of the desire to create a few contrast tutorials. And yeah, other than that, I just took him and started painting him on stream, or finishing it on stream, because he originated, like I said, as a study piece for contrast. And then, yeah, I just turned it into a, wait a second. I think that was right around when the new, the box, how do they call them? Battle Force, I think, came out.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And there were Imperial Fists and Crimson Fists. So I have to admit that was a bit of calculation to put that video out when that box came out. So it was just at the right place at the right time, I guess.
Sure. No, I like this one. It's fun. Obviously I watched you paint over this, and there's a couple different things that I want to that I find, really interesting about this one. I love the alternate take on like the plasma glow. Obviously, it's a very, I don't normally see that set of tones used in plasma glow, and I like it here a lot, given the sort of color palette you're working with. The other thing I loved is, I think at one point in the video when you're doing the helmet or whatever, you're kind of giving him like the stripey part they have, right?
Mhm.
And you were like, well, I don't know what the Crimson Fist exact, stripey thing is, so we're just gonna make it like the Ultramarines because that's what I'm doing. So there we go. Which I thought exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to deal with people that look at my stuff and say, the background says it has to be like this and that. I mean, obviously, I get that online, but I can just ignore these comments. I don't have to put these on the table and play with them, and then, some random guy walks up to you and they say, that's not really true. You should paint that different. And I mean, who cares, right? I'm painting for myself. I mean, sure, I paint for myself in front of a lot of people, but I just found that to be interesting. So I painted what was interesting to me and not what was correct or what feels correct to other people. So that's, just paint for yourself. It doesn't matter what other people say. And that brings me back to the plasma. I feel like, with the Primaris being, top of the line, new gear, polished and all of that, I felt like I really wanted to have the grimdark aspect of 40K still in there. So I feel like plasma is this archaic, no one really knows how it works, but it melts stuff when you pull this trigger.
Sometimes the person who pulls the trigger, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. In either way, it melts something. But that's why I wanted this orange tone in there and this black, and still have the shine of the plasma coming through. So that was the reasoning behind that.
Yeah, I want to. There's a couple other things I want to unpack. Like this is it's a really interesting fig to me for a couple of reasons. So and it'll kind of align with some of your recent content too. So that is to say, if we look here at the shoulder pad, you're using this sort of here it's a reflection, but you're using it as the interior edge highlighting sort of thing. Obviously GW's famous for like edging edges, right? And just like the edge of the edge of the edge. And here you use it, I think, in a really smart way, where you kind of have it here to represent this sort of pseudo secondary reflection of the light kind of bouncing off of this reflective crimson piece here, but it's not as much up here just because of the nature of where the shadow falls and stuff. Like, so you didn't use one here, but you did here. And I have to say, like, this feels so much more organic to me than just like tracing a thin line around the inside.
Yeah. Right? I mean, it's the same principle, right? It creates contrast. because we need contrast in miniatures, otherwise they're boring and feel like
Right.
plastic. So yeah, the principle is I put a line there, then I have the dark line next to it, and then the red starts. So I have them separated, but they still, feel like they feel like individual objects, but they still interact because of that secondary light, and like you explained, it's just I like to interpret things when I paint miniatures. Sure, it's not always the quote unquote correct thing to do, but it's the way I want to express myself, or that I want to express, or emphasize this structure that I have in front of me, this volume, this shape.
Right.
And sure, you could find probably 5, 6, 7 different spots on this miniature where you could say, oh, this is wrong, or this would never reflect like that. But it just made sense while painting it. And same principle as with the markings.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the actually crowd. Like, that is to say, the actually crowd to me is when, you sort of, you're doing it, and you're doing it with intentionality. Like, you have a reason why you're doing it. And then somebody comes up to you and says, well, actually, that wouldn't exactly work like that. And I want to say, and my general impression is like, well, actually, I felt like doing it this way. Like, I can make the choice that I find compelling, but I appreciate it.
Totally.
Which, speaking of choices that you found compelling, this is one thing I've wanted to ask you about since I first saw this figure, so I'm glad I get to ask you in person. Okay, so his head marking, whatever that is, they're like sergeant, lieutenant, whatever this thing is, marking up top. You have that rather scratched, and I think that looks great. Like, really nice etching of the sort of paint where it's clearly been, kind of scratched up or messed up over time. But the rest of him is rather free of any kind of scratching or dip battle damage. Was that an intentional choice to etch that because it kind of broke up what is otherwise a relatively flat color section, whereas you had the contrast already working everywhere else? Like, what was your thought there?
Yeah, I'm smiling from ear to ear because that's a funny question. That came up about 1,700 times. And I just said, yeah. I mean, basically same answer. I just felt like doing it, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I had a bit of a reasoning behind it, since the armor, I feel like that's the super hard material, and that's also the reason, if you compare the two reds, so the reds on the marking to maybe the reds on the shoulder guard, the shoulder guard red is feels a bit more metallic,
right,
in the reflections. So that's why I actually think this is colored metal or material, or whatever the Space Marine armor is made out of.
Imaginarium, yeah. Unobtainium, no,
Exactly.
Some kind of future triceramite-tanium. There we go, sure.
Exactly, yeah. That's the correct term, I assume.
Pretty sure, yeah.
And the markings are more like paint that is put on there.
Yep.
So I guess, paint would scratch before the unobtainium thing would scratch. So I actually had a reasoning behind it.
No, it tracks to me. Like, that's just it. When I looked at it, I found it an interesting choice. No part of me was like, actually, if the head is that scratched, then shouldn't the rest? Like, no, okay. I also thought it can just be an artistic choice because the white and red tend to be a little more flat just because of the nature of their placement. They're rather even. Like, they're not doing any big moves where you would have a reason to shift the color in a vast way like you do with the shoulders, right? Where they're traveling through different planes. And so, like, it's just a good way to get visual confusion into that space where you didn't need it on somewhere like, his shoulder pad or that sort of belly plate or whatever, where it's traveling in these angles and you have those reflections. But yeah, I like that. And I will say that, like, you can see that you did carry it through. It's not in no way, by the way, was I trying to say you made a wrong choice. You can see where you carried it through because, like, the gun has some minor wear and scratches like that, because it would be something that's more upfront, more in combat. And it's this step between where we have, like, the armor is the hardest thing because it's protecting his life. The whatever spray paint they put over the top to mark his helmet's the first thing to go, right? It all tracks. So
yeah, to be honest, I didn't. Oh my god, Sorry, are you hearing my notifications, by the way?
No, nope.
Okay, great. So sorry for that. Yeah, so I didn't think that far, I have to admit. I just thought a few scratches on the gun would look cool.
Sometimes it just works.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Right on. Okay, cool. All right. So next up, we have this guy I was very excited for, and you've done some painting of this on your channel as well, obviously. But this is a great sculpture that you yourself did. This guy's wonderful. So you want to walk us through this, dude?
So that is based on an artwork that I found on, what is it called? ArtStation, I think. And the guy was inspired by Dark Souls, and I was inspired by the guy. So I asked him whether or not it's okay to use it as a base and to make my own interpretation of it. So if you go to my website, where there's actually a store to buy these,
which I will also link down in the description.
Thank you. No, but yeah, I have him quoted on the store front because sometimes I will get inspired by people, but I always try to give them credit. And I always ask them, because there's a lot of companies that just use other people's IP, which I don't really like, because I also don't want someone to take my pieces and, you know, reproduce them and then sell them for maybe, I don't know, a quarter of what I sell them.
Right, sure.
Yeah, so I don't want to do that to other people. So I saw this artwork, and it was an undead guy with a turban. And I took that concept and I made it my own. With the he has this. So the idea behind this guy was he was trying to live forever. He's probably some rich guy that did everything in his powers to try to live forever. So he thought about, yeah, maybe if I joined a church, or, you know, if I'm going to church, that would be a good thing. And that's why he has the cross there. But he also has an occult symbol, like the slight Cthulhu-esque emblem. And you tell me which of the two powers made him live forever. That was the idea behind that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love there's a lot of little detail on this guy, like, not to mention his like lizard friend or iguana, or I don't know what exact creature it is, but his little friend, his little familiar. Obviously, yeah. Wizards often have familiars, and you know, like, that's how I read that little dude. But I love his face just looks like the uneven eyes is something you get very rarely on miniatures, right? And it immediately puts it into an off. How do I want to say this? It puts the viewer off in exactly the right way, right? Because he's undead, or at least, you know, in some advanced state of decay, right? It gives you just the uneven nature of the eyes, and the way the one is like sagging. It communicates so much, because we as humans are trained to like look at eyes, right, and read eyes. And so that, and just like also the top lip being basically gone. Like he still has his bottom lip, right? It's still there. It's still rather full. But like how creepy a face gets when that top lip is basically removed, right? Yeah. You dehumanized him in these really interesting ways.
Yeah. So also the eyes, we like symmetry, and if something is not symmetric, especially if faces are not symmetric, that puts us off. That was also an idea behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is absolutely great. I dig the heck out of this, dude.
Thank you.
All right. So this one here, we've got a little dual piece going on, right?
Yeah, that was also a funny story.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, so after 2013, which was my last shot at Games Day, or at Golden Demons, sorry. It's now called Warhammer Fest. I wanted to go back last year because they brought back Warhammer Fest Europe.
Right. Which are they not doing it this year?
I have
Or
no idea. I'm so mad.
I,
I want to draw a. I don't know. I forgot the meme. The I have no idea. They suck with their announcements. They
they could really do with announcing this stuff farther in advance by
yeah.
a good measure. Yeah.
They just don't care. It's like we'll announce this 2 weeks before, and everything's going to be fine. Who cares? They don't really give the painters credit, or they don't really acknowledge that people invest a lot of time into their entries. They just don't acknowledge that, which is a bit of a shame, I would say, and it annoys me deeply. But so they brought it back last year. I don't know if it's going to happen. I think it might still happen in December or something like that. It's definitely not or I don't know. It's probably not happening in August, which it was last year. But yeah, I wanted to go back, and the way my brain works, it's like, oh, it's fine. I have enough time. And eventually, there's not enough time. So I painted this entry as a dual entry, and I painted the whole base. I created the base and painted the base one night before the Golden Demon, and then I wasn't happy with it, and I didn't bring the piece. So yeah.
The so this never actually went and competed?
Yeah, not yet. I mean, I think there's at least going to be another UK Golden Demon. So that's
Oh, sure.
yeah. So eventually it will go. But yeah, I just wanted to, because people love freehands on Instagram. I just felt like, yeah, I'm going to file down that shield, or sandpaper down that shield, and just do a symbol like a hammer in a completely free-handed on, just to gain Instagram followers.
Well, it looks awesome, and I think most of my Stormcast I've painted, I did the exact same thing. I hate that sculpted detail on there, actually. Like, it's so much more. I wish they made like an alternate variant of this shield that was just flat and blank, so I didn't have to go through the trouble, right? Because it's such a great canvas for doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
And it's also like, in almost any way you position it at a certain angle, it's covering the vast majority of the figure, right? So you have to do something interesting with it. And I just hate that they have so much of it covered up with like basically this stock detail that I can't do anything with. So yeah, I get that completely. No, this is cool. What I wanted to talk about on this one is just one, your checkerboards, whatever we want to say, his pants, Mr. Chaos Guy's pants, right? I loved the way you managed to keep the checkerboard like completely so perfectly clean, and yet really, really nicely mimic the stretch of the pants, right? As he's moving with it. That was actually like one of the things that super impressed me about this was which sounds silly. I'm staring at a chaos dude's butt, but he's got great looking squares on his butt. Like just the way you followed the fold, the way his muscles are sort of would be contorting the cloth. I really like the distending of the squares. I think it looks really nice.
Yeah, I think that's a compliment that all Chaos Barbarians want to hear. You have a nice checker pattern. Your butt.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's actually how they get noticed and get promoted. Absolutely up the ranks. Yeah, it's about that.
Now, I'm happy that you saw that, because Golden Demons always are about, or winning a Golden Demon is always about these details that, where they realize, okay, you put that extra thought in and that extra effort, and at least in theory, that is what wins you demons. That's what they say wins you demons. And yeah, I really tried doing that. It was interesting because I just built that. I just painted the white surface, and then put in the red diamonds or checkers or whatever you want to call them, and then just moved square by square to really acknowledge the different stretching of the pants, and it came out pretty good. I'm pretty fond of that.
Yeah, I like it a lot. The other thing I want to draw everyone's attention to here, which I hope they've noticed, but it's just, we talked earlier about skin tones and sort of the story. Like I said, I know standard recipe, and I love experimenting with skin tones. So when I saw this dude, immediately I loved everything about the Chaos Guy skin tone, right? Because you've worked these greens in with these desaturated reds as a complement to it, and the highlights have a gray tone to them. It's really, really interesting take. Like, he still appears human, right? Like,
Yeah.
that is to say, I don't think he's some kind of monster,
Mhm.
but he's clearly not a normal human, right? He has been twisted in some way, and you've communicated so much just through these tonal shifts and through the variation you've got going on there. So I really, really like the tones you've achieved there.
Yeah, I should have included maybe a front shot. Here I just wanted to show off with the freehand. The front shot actually shows it better, I think. What I wanted to do, because I clearly thought about Frazetta-esque skin
Right.
tones here.
Yep.
And I gave it my own twist, and it doesn't look exactly like the Frazetta tones, but that was definitely an inspiration.
No, I can see that. He always loved having, like, lots of those pollution colors, those interference colors in his skin of greens and blues and deep purples and stuff like that would often make it seem, the way he would just use every color in skin tone was always amazing. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
All right. And here we have another whip guy. This is one of the new possessed, right?
Yeah, exactly. So everyone was crazy for Chaos. And this is, I don't, how to say that? I'm not super fond of the new Chaos, but
Okay.
I definitely wanted to paint one of them because they were really hyped at that time. And I really like Chaos Space Marines. I just don't 100% like the direction they are going in. But this one was interesting because it had different materials.
Right. Yep.
So a lot of flesh and mutated flesh, and I just wanted to have fun with that. Yeah, that's why I aim for really bright flesh and almost, like actual flesh without skin, because you see where the veins are running down his forearm. I tried to go for a tendon look there, and then it transitions into that claw. So I had deeper reds, and yeah, it wasn't, I did not take that much time, because if I had taken more time or wanted to take more time, I'd probably had also detailed out the front a bit more of the claw. But it was just having fun with washes and yeah, trying different ways to bring together gradients, and yeah, that was the idea behind that.
Sure. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of process, right?
Mhm.
Because this is another thing that sort of fascinates me about how people work. So, how often, when you're working around a miniature, right? Your way here seems to me to be, and from having watched you, seems to be that, like, you'll take an area and you kind of focus and take that particular area up to not done, but to, like, done-ish, right?
Mhm.
So you kind of have it to the point where you're happy with it, and you've got a good idea of what it will sort of look like in a done state. And then you move to a separate area of the miniature, right? And you kind of take that up. Let's call it like 90% or something. I don't know, whatever, right?
Mhm.
And then you kind of, at the end, once you're done, you kind of come back and re-look at everything. Is it still all working together? And that's when you refine the last 10%.
Exactly. Bring it together.
Right. It just, so what leads you to like that method, as opposed to, say, slapping down some kind of bass tone across the whole thing and then working an individual way up or something like that? Like, how has your particular process evolved for you, and what makes you like that particular method?
So good question. I couldn't really tell you. It just feels so I really like the approach of putting down base colors and then sketching the lights in and all of that, and see how everything works together. If I could only paint like that, I'd be fine too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
However, this has just, I guess for me it is, I can start something and finish something to a certain percentage, like you explained, within a time frame, say, I don't know, 3 hours, 4 hours. So I will have something finished, or quote unquote finished.
Right.
And that feels kind of satisfying to me. I think that is the only reason. I think it has to do with brain chemistry.
No, I get it, because I often do this sort of this is very much in the same way that I approach things.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's it's almost like you set micro goals for yourself, and so you feel like in a sitting you've accomplished something. You do get that sort of hit, right, of satisfaction, of accomplishment in your brain. Even if it's a small component, you're like, okay, good. That's to a point where I'm happy enough with it for now, right? And so you feel like you've done something.
Also, it does tie back into, I don't start with a plan.
Sure. Which is interesting, because I do feel like this method can work against and for you in that way.
Totally.
Right? Like, it can work for you because you can just sort of decide as you go. But I've also had it work against me, where suddenly I'll get to some last component and I'm just like, all right, I have no idea what to do with this now. You know what I mean? I've backed myself into a corner on this one. So, yeah.
But hey, it's just paint. You can paint over it.
That's right. You can always just paint over it. And there we go. All right. We're back to the beginning.
Sorry. Yeah, that's 100% true. It's like every approach to painting, it can work for you or against you.
Right. Totally. Yeah, there's no perfect method, I think. It's one of those things I'm really interested in, is sort of the process, the methodology. Not because I think there's some right way to do it, because I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, everybody, people sort of develop as they go along on the journey. Everybody sort of develops their own process, their own methodology that leads to their own styles. But I'm fascinated by what makes people want to work in that way, right? Because I'm not sure in the same way I've ever unpacked it for myself. But the questions occurred, like, why do I like to do this?
Yeah, totally. No, I get it. Also, it's interesting for people that are trying to find a way to ask, established artists, why are they doing it? But sometimes there's just not really an answer that will help you further. It's if that makes sense, because I just do it because it's brain chemistry, because it rewards me. That might not work for you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Or because it just sort of organically became your style, or or both, right? Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now we're going to do some Q&A. So people watching, drop some questions over here in the comments, wherever that happens to be on your screen. It's here somewhere. But I've got my standard questions. Here's my lightning round questions.
Okay.
So as usual, we ambush the guest with the lightning round questions. Here you go. Okay. What is your favorite? What's your favorite single color to work with?
Oh wow. I mean, I guess orange and teal. Well, single color, huh? Yeah, maybe turquoise.
Okay.
Some variation of turquoise.
I completely support this answer. Absolutely, turquoise, best color. Good, you made the right choice. All right.
I mean, there's so many turquoises. There's in Cubic Darkness, and turquoise just has this range of colors that helps you in a lot of situations.
Also, that's very interesting, right? That's the key. Like, all of them have like really interesting visual elements. Yeah. I'm with you completely. All right. Who is your favorite miniature painter working right now, besides yourself?
Yeah, I feel like that question is. I'm sorry, I'm not. Do you want like quick single line?
Oh, you can answer it in whatever level of detail you want. I'm asking the questions. They're simple questions, but you can give any kind of answer you want.
Yeah, I just like so many painters because personally I don't want to get stuck within a certain style. I mean, obviously I do, because that's just what our brains do. Right. But I try to stay as open as possible. So I look at so many painters and I try to learn from every single one. But I mean, from a technical viewpoint, it's probably Lance Studios right now. He's pushing the envelope. Same as Kirill Kanaev. They are out of this world painters because they just put in the meticulous, dots and lines and everything that is needed, and they're just completely out of this world miniatures. As far as creativity and my own approach, it's kind of similar to theirs. Is Nico Deze or Dize? I don't know. It's a French.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Secret Workshop. I think they're buddies too, so they kind of influence themselves, I guess, or each other. Sorry, those two, from this point of view, they are pretty good when it comes to just combining colors and doing it quickly and dirty.
Yeah,
and
sure.
it looks great. So that is a dichotomy, like what's that word? When you have two opposite ends.
Oh, sure. Yeah. They're complementary, to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like all those choices. I mean, obviously, Secret Workshop, took the sword, right, for his.
Oh yeah, sure.
For his troll. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
There you go. So and yeah, all those people I cannot disagree with any of that. That's all. It's amazing miniature painters, one and all, no doubt about it. Okay. So when you're painting for yourself, do you what do you listen to? What do you have on in the background, or do you sit in silence when you're not streaming or something?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I was about to say when I'm streaming, I'm listening to music, and then I just get the copyright strikes. On Twitch, it doesn't matter so much. I don't stream with music when I'm on YouTube, but I when I'm just painting and there's no recording and no streaming, I like to binge series. Series?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
shows.
TV. Yeah, shows. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you find it distracts you at all? Do you just listen, or are you able to watch at the same time?
For some people, it doesn't work at all, but I feel like I get what's happening in the show and I can still paint. So I never watched Evangelion.
Oh yeah, sure.
So I just did that yesterday when I was painting my Avid Chosen entry. Yeah, that's my favorite thing.
Awesome. I can't do it. I have to have something that doesn't require any kind of visible. So I usually will have YouTube content on that doesn't require me looking at it at all. You know what I mean? Where it's just somebody basically talking. Something like what this is theoretically, right? Would be exactly what I would paint to.
Yeah, I mean, I will out myself and I will say I do like Joe Rogan's podcast to listen to. There's
nothing wrong with that. It is the most popular podcast or one of the top 3 most popular podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to agree with everything he says, but his approach of, I mean, that's something that bothers me also in miniature painting is that there's so much, okay, this is my favorite painter and this is my favorite style and this is my tribe, and I will bash your head in if you disagree with me.
Sure.
And he's yeah, guys, I mean, who cares about that? And that's what I like in him, and he's open to stuff, and that's what I'm trying to be with miniature painting. So I don't know.
No, I get it completely. Yeah, it's the kind of thing where there's no, I don't know, yes, there's competitions. Duh, people go to competition, but all I've ever met generally in the hobby is people who are very positive and open. This is a great community, and for the most part, it's just people who. Artists who want to share and help and teach and stuff like that. So, yeah, no reason but to celebrate. I say that's why I wanted to do this show. All right, let's see. Final question, and you can answer my final question. Then we got a couple from the audience.
Sure.
But and I don't know if you do, but what paint tastes the best? Assuming you lick your brush or something, like I do.
Oh my God. No, I don't. I mean, the occasional, sharpening of the tip is what I do. But after I cleaned it, I mean, I guess you can never clean a brush thoroughly with painting. Can you see that? right? Whereas it,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you got it. You're good.
eventually your painting water looks like that, so it's never actually clean. So I would be lying to myself. But I just make my tip sharper with my tongue. That sounded so wrong. But that's the only time I do put a brush in my mouth.
Gotcha. All right. So not a paint eater. Perfectly fair. All right.
Although it does get views on YouTube. Let's put it that way.
Sure. Look, I can't help myself. I often soften, like that is to say, as I'm going. So like I'll be working and then I'll want to transition to start like feathering or to something like that. So instead of going to my paper towel, which is sitting there and perfectly wet, I'll just sort of unthinkingly like touch the brush to my tongue and that kind of thing. So whatever.
I mean, I think I used to do. I mean, never spit blended or anything like that. But I used to do that sometimes. You know, having the brush in my mouth with paint. But I actively counter, or I tried to get rid of that habit. Let's put it that way, and it worked.
Oh, good. It's something I should probably look into, but here we are. All right. So let's see. Let's go to a couple questions from the people watching, and then we'll wrap up. First question. Do you have a favorite paint brand that you like to work with? And do you ever work with oil paints?
So oil paints, everything that feels like technical paints to me, I'm not interested in. So that's why I also don't like metallics that much, because to me it feels a bit more like a technical paint, because you apply a base coat and then you shade it down with whatever transparent color you have, or not transparent, however you want to do it. So oils, yeah, they take too long to dry. I'm not that much results orientated, so I feel like a lot of people that take all these different paints are super results orientated, and they will say, okay, oils are the smoothest result, and that's what I want to have, so therefore I use oil colors. To me, the process of painting is more important, and I enjoy just using acrylics for what they are and for the result they give, and for what experience they give, not for. I mean, sure, I also like the results. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But I'm more process orientated than results orientated.
No, I get it. Yeah.
Favorite brand of colors is I completely mix them. The brand of colors I use the most are Vallejo, Model Color, and Reaper, and I also have a couple of game colors by Vallejo and Reapers. I have managed to almost get a complete set of Reapers through their sponsoring, which kind of sucks because I really like the paints, but now everyone thinks I'm just promoting them because they
sure.
But I really like them because I started using scale 75 colors for their mattness, but I absolutely hate how they behave by now. So Reaper does kind of behave like the other colors, like the Vallejos, for example, and there are mats on top of it. So that's why I really like them. So yeah, Games Workshop, Vallejo, Reaper are my three go-to brands at the moment.
Nice. Right on.
Subject to change, obviously.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's in the end, this is one of those things that's like, I like to experiment with all different kinds of paint because I never know if I'm going to, because even within a brand, obviously different colors can have different, consistencies and finishes and stuff like that. So you might find like in a particular range, you might find this white or this green or this, ochre that you really like. And so that just becomes part of the mix. It's not maybe you don't even like the rest of that particular line, but that one just happens to be a good mix, right? Because these are all little chemistry projects, every color, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Totally, yeah.
Let's see. How much time do you usually allow yourself to spend on a competition piece?
How much time do I allow myself?
Yes. Do you cap for time when you're painting for competition at all? or do you just say unlimited? Like basically within, of course, the reasons of life. Like, do you just say like this is going to go till it's done, basically?
Yeah, it's finished when it's finished, or when the day of competition hits.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would give the same answer, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're really doing something for competition, the only end date is the day you've got to show up there and turn the
Yeah.
thing in. And so if you artificially limit yourself, then if you've done that, then you know you haven't taken it as far as it could go because you stopped painting when you knew you still had something to do, right? Which the very definition of a competition miniature to me is you take it to the point where you're like, okay, I'm out, right? Like I have nothing else I could think of to do here. I've looked at this, I've stared at this. I like every blend, every move I'm making here, every highlight placement, every tonal change. Like this is where I want it to be.
Yeah, to me, it's more like, okay, I stared at this long enough. I hate it, and yeah, that's it. No, but I mean, this is contradicting myself a bit. But obviously, I'm going to try to make everything as perfect as can be. I just came to the realization you cannot be perfect. Someone will always be looking at this and say, okay, this is no, that's worded wrong. You can never get a blend that is 100% perfect. There will
Right.
always be, yeah, and that's it. That's it. So to me, if the contrast is good, if the color composition works, sure, I'll try to push every gradient to be perfect, quote unquote. But at some point in time, there's nothing you can do better, even though it is not 100% perfect. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I hope I didn't give the impression that I'm aiming
No,
at
no, no, no,
perfection
no.
there. Okay, yeah. Because I agree. They're like the perfect miniature isn't a thing because
Yeah.
even if those technical things were all correct, let's assume that you could actually reach some form of technical perfection, right? To what end?
Sure.
Right? Like because okay, but there's still an artistic element to it that's theoretically at least as important, if not more so, right? And like what does perfection even mean in that case? Right? Like how you so yeah, there's too many layers to it to ever actually get to perfect. To me,
Yeah.
it's just about getting to like, okay, I have nothing else I can think of to do. You know what I mean? Like I've
Yeah.
hit my skill wall, as it were, right?
But yeah, I mean, that's so there's not a single answer I can get that is going to be appropriate every single time for a competition piece. Sometimes the deadline hits. Sometimes I'm fed up with it.
Sure.
Sometimes I think it's good enough. Yeah. So.
Do you find yourself not liking your work when you're done with it? Like how
Um,
often? What's your relationship with your previous work?
I think I had to. So I don't know what exactly it is, but for the first 10 years, I would say I didn't like a single finished piece. Right by now, I have, maybe accepted a few truths that exist within miniature painting that you just cannot change, and therefore I do. Nowadays, I like my finished stuff. Obviously, I can point out things that I would have done different or that I would
Sure.
like to improve. But in general, I like my things almost 100% of the time nowadays.
All right. Awesome. Very good. It's funny because that's another of those things that I find varies a lot. I know for me personally, some stuff I finish I end up quite liking. Some stuff I finish I end up hating. And I don't know what the difference is. You know what I mean? Like it's not a qualitative difference that makes me make that decision, or even like an amount of time I spent with it. I just sometimes the piece comes out and I'm like, nah.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
All right, let's see. All right, some quicker
Sorry.
wins. Oh, go ahead.
Just to add on to that,
Yeah.
if I feel like I'm going to a place that I don't like the miniature to end up with, I'd rather stop painting the miniature than. Maybe that's why I like 100% of my finished stuff, because I abandon the stuff that I don't like. Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
That's probably a good habit because I'm definitely a like just push through, right, type of person. So, yeah, no, quitting early and often. Steve Levitt, like the economist, he said that like the secret to actual success in life is to quit early and often, right?
Yeah.
So maybe advice I could take better.
Thank you.
Okay. Here's some quick questions. What's your favorite type of music and artist in said genre?
Um, it's not heavy metal. Feels like it's the go-to music in miniature painting. I don't know. I like the new synthwave stuff most of the time. Um, yeah, that's something I listen to. I do like 80s music in general. So I mean, maybe yeah. The one song that I'm listening to on repeat right now is Weezer featuring Tears for Fears. Everybody wants to rule the world.
Nice. All right. Dig it. Good combo. Good combo. And yes, I support the synthwave stuff. There's so much good synthwave like on YouTube right now of like bands doing great work with that. And like yes, they're hitting that nostalgia beat, but they're also doing like a lot of good new work with it. I have a whole playlist that I use for when I want to work in those colors in that palette. I actually use that playlist because for some reason I don't know, it makes my brain think that way.
Nice.
So it's just kind of an alignment there. I often will make playlists specific to kind of like I want to say to the color palette, but that's not actually what I mean. What I mean is like to the mood of the piece, if that tracks at all. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
Something about it, just something about getting your brain thinking in that way, I find it helps me then work with the pain easier. I don't know.
Yeah. Nice.
All right. Guy says, how many? So I'll reframe his question slightly because the exact question was, if this gets, X number of likes, will you do an airbrush video? He wants. So I guess the question is, what does he have to do to get you to do an airbrush video? I think is the question.
So I said it before. I mean, I often kid it has become a bit of a meme on my channel that I hate airbrushing, which I don't. I just don't like to do it. It comes down again to it being a technical thing.
Right.
And I just want to take a brush, slap some paint around, and then say, okay, yeah, I got some progress done. But when I'm moving in September, I finally get a basement. I finally get a studio and all that. I'm definitely going to set up an airbrush place. So yeah, sometimes in October probably.
There you go, guy.
Yeah,
not long now.
No need to sell out for likes because I'm going to do it. I'm so bad with marketing and all that. I should have pushed that a bit more.
Just like have a really set the premiere like 2 months in advance on YouTube. Yeah, exactly. All right, final question. When you're sculpting, what do you look at for inspiration? Do you look at a lot of concept and 2D art? You mentioned it earlier a little bit. Like, do you find yourself going to that as a source often? And where do you come up with your ideas? The question here is for armor, but I think we could expand that to sort of other things.
For armor, I do follow an Instagram channel that I don't know the name of, but they do. It's the Armor Smith or something like that. Really inspirational stuff. Sometimes, or most of the time, it's historical. Sometimes they deviate a bit and it's fantasy. But for armor, I kind of look at that. Other than that, just there is a bit of muscle memory, embroidery that I have that I can put on any miniature, in my sleep. For inspiration, definitely just DeviantArt.
Yeah, sure.
And ArtStation. Those are the two platforms that I look at the most. Do
you find stuff in the real world often that inspires you? Like, are you ever walking around and just see something out there in the world that captures your eye?
Yeah, so something that I always take pictures of, but that I haven't really used so far is just statues. Like old bronze.
Yeah, sure.
I do that a lot, and also churches. European old churches. The ceilings. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
Probably a name for that. Yeah, that's what I'm always taking pictures of, but I never end up using it. I always intend to use it in some way, but it just doesn't happen.
I get it. It's the same way. Like, have you ever been to St. Paul's Cathedral in London?
Oh yeah, ages ago.
Like they have that ceiling work that's just
Uh,
right. It's incredible. And it's one of my favorite places for that. I love old churches, I love old art, so I totally get that. Yeah, it makes sense. All right. That's our questions. Well, sir, there we go. Interview over. We're good. But hey, thank you very much, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure sitting here and chatting with you for a while. I hope this was fun. So thank you very much for coming on.
yeah, thank you for having me. It was definitely fun. I'm sorry I dragged it out to like 2 hours.
It's not a problem at all. If it's a good conversation, then the time is used well.
Gotcha. Yeah, to me, it's never just a yes or no answer, type. There's so many layers to everything, and that's also because that is also good because we can have fun with a lot of in between stuff. You
Right.
have to do one or the other. You can do everything in between, and there's just a wide palette of in between with this hobby.
Completely agree. That is a very good note to end on. So I would encourage everybody to both explore the wide palette of in between, and also, as we mentioned, to check out everything for Trovarion. It's down there in the description. So go check out his YouTube, his website, check out his Patreon. Sir, thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate it. And oh, good.
It was fun. It was really fun. Thank you.
And to all of you out there, thank you very much for watching. It's always appreciated. And we will be back with more artist interviews in the future. So we'll see you next time.